Zayd ibn Harithah, Zayd mawla Muhammad, was a companion of Muhammad who was at one stage regarded as his son. He is the only companion whose name appears in the Qur'an. Childhood. Zayd is said to have been 10 years younger than Muhammad, suggesting a birth year of c. 581. He is also said to have been 55 years old at his death in 629, indicating a birth date of 576. He was born into the Udhra branch of the Kalb tribe in the Najd of Central Arabia. He claimed a pedigree 12th in descent from Udhra ibn Zayd al-Lat, who was in turn alleged to have been a great-great-grandson of Kalb ibn Wabara. Zayd's mother, Suda bint Thalaba, was from the Man branch of the Tayy tribe. When Zayd was a young boy of an age at which he could be a servant, he accompanied his mother on a visit to her family. While they were staying with the Man tribe, horsemen from the Qayn tribe raided the tents and kidnapped Zayd. They took him to the market at Ukaz and sold him as a slave for 400 dinars. Zayd's family searched for him, but without success. A lament is attributed to his father, Harithah ibn Shurahil. Slavery in Mecca. Zayd was purchased by a merchant of Mecca, Hakim ibn Hizam, who gave the boy as a present to his aunt, Khadijah bint Khuwaylid. He remained in her possession until the day she married Muhammad, when she gave the slave as a wedding present to her bridegroom. Muhammad became very attached to Zayd, to whom he referred as Al-Habib. Some years later, some members of Zayd's tribe happened to arrive in Mecca on pilgrimage. They encountered Zayd and recognized each other, and he asked them to take a message home. On receiving this message, Zayd's father and uncle immediately set out for Mecca. They found Muhammad at the Kaaba and promised him any ransom if he would return Zayd to them. Muhammad replied that Zayd should be allowed to choose his fate, but that if he wished to return to his family, Muhammad would release him without accepting any ransom in exchange. They called for Zayd, who easily recognized his father and uncle, but told them that he did not want to leave Muhammad. "For I have seen something in this man, and I am not the kind of person who would ever choose anyone in preference to him." Quote. At this, Muhammad took Zayd to the steps of the Kaaba, where legal contracts were agreed and witnessed, and announced to the crowds, "Witness that Zayd becomes my son, with mutual rights of inheritance." Quote. On seeing this, Zayd's father and uncle were satisfied, and they returned home without him. In accordance with the Arabic custom of adoption at the time, Zayd was thereafter known as Zayd ibn Muhammad, and was a freedman, regarded socially and legally as Muhammad's son. Subsequently, after the Qur'an ordinance that an adopted son is not the same as begotten son, he was known as Zayd ibn Harithah, and subsequently, Muhammad married the divorced wife of Zayd. Conversion to Islam. At an unknown date before 610, Zayd accompanied Muhammad to Taif, where it was a tradition to sacrifice meat to the idols. Near Balda on the way back to Mecca, they met Zayd ibn Amr and offered him some of the cooked meat that Zayd was carrying in the bag. Zayd ibn Amr, an outspoken monotheist, replied, "I do not eat anything which you slaughter in the name of your stone idols. I eat number those things on which Allah's name has been mentioned at the time of slaughtering." Quote. After this encounter, said Muhammad, "I never stroked an idol of theirs, nor did I sacrifice to them, until God honored me with his apostleship." When Muhammad reported in 610 that he had received a revelation from the angel Gabriel, Zayd was one of the first converts to Islam, while Khadijah was the first Muslim of all. She was closely followed by her neighbor Lubaba bint al-Harith, her 4 daughters, and the first male converts, Ali, Zayd and Abu Bakr. The Hijra. In 622, Zayd joined the other Muslims in the Hijra to Medina. Once settled in the new city, Muhammad urged each Muslim to take a brother in religion, so that each would have an ally in the community. Zayd was paired with Muhammad's uncle Hamza. Hamza accordingly trusted his last testament to Zayd just before his death in 625. A few months later, Muhammad and Abu Bakr sent Zayd back to Mecca to escort the families to Medina. The return party consisted of Muhammad's wife Sauda, his daughters Kulthum and Fatima, his servant Abu Rafi, Zayd's wife Baraka, and the son Usama, Abu Bakr's wife Rahman, his children Asma, Abdullah and Aisha, and a guide named Abdullah ibn Urayqi, and Abu Bakr's kinsman Talha also decided to accompany them. Marriages and children. Zayd married at least 6 times. Dirah bint Abi Lahab, a cousin of Muhammad. They were divorced. The dates are unknown, but Dirah's 2 brothers were divorced from Muhammad's 2 daughters in 613. Ayman, Muhammad's freedwoman. They were married after Islam, and the son was born in 612. Hind bint Ali Wwam, a niece of Khadijah. Humaymah bint Safi, the widow of al-Bara ibn Ma'ur, a chief in Medina. Al-Bara died in August to September 622, so the marriage to Zayd was presumably in or after 623. Zainab bint Jahsh, a cousin of Muhammad. They were married in 625 and divorced in late 626. Kulthum bint Uqba, a maternal sister of Caliph Uthman. This marriage was ordered by Muhammad in 628, but it ended in divorce. Zayd had 3 children. Usama, son of Baraka, who had descendants, but the number never exceeded 20 in any given generation. Zayd, son of Kulthum, who died in infancy. Ruqayya, daughter of Kulthum, who died while under the care of Uthman. Marriage to Zainab bint Jahsh. Around 625, Muhammad proposed that his cousin, Zainab bint Jahsh, should marry Zayd. At first she refused on the grounds that she was of the Quraysh. It has been suggested that differences between Zainab's social status and Zayd's were precisely the reason why Muhammad wanted to arrange the marriage. The Prophet was well aware that it is a person's standing in the eyes of Allah that is important, rather than his or her status in the eyes of the people. The marriage would demonstrate that it was not who their ancestors were, but rather the standing in the sight of Allah that mattered. By contrast, Montgomery Watt points out that Zayd was high in Muhammad's esteem. She can hardly have thought that he was not good enough. She was an ambitious woman, however, and may already have hoped to marry Muhammad, or she may have wanted to marry someone with whom Muhammad did not want his family to be so closely allied. When Muhammad announced a new verse of the Qur'an, 33-36, it is not fitting for a believer, man or woman, when a matter has been decided by Allah and His Messenger, to have any option about the decision. If anyone disobeys Allah and His Messenger, he is indeed on a clearly wrong path. Surah Al-Ahzab, Quran 33-36. Zainab acquiesced and married Zayd. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. Ibn Sa'd and al-Tabari both cite this tradition about the divorce. Muhammad ibn Yahya ibn Hayyan narrated, "The Messenger of God came to Zayd ibn Harithah's house seeking him. Perhaps the Messenger of God missed him at the time. That is why he said, 'Where is Zayd?' He went to his house seeking him, and when he did not find him, Zainab bint Jahsh stood up to him in a house dress. But the Messenger of God turned away from her. She said, 'He is not here, Messenger of God, so please come in. My father and mother are your ransom.' The Messenger of God refused to come in. Zainab had hurried to dress herself when she heard that the Messenger of God was at her door, so she leapt in a hurry, and the Messenger of God liked her when she did that. The heart of the Prophet was filled with admiration for her. He went away muttering something that was hardly understandable but for this sentence, "Praise be to God who disposes the hearts." Quote, when Zayd came back home, she told him that the messenger of God came. Zayd asked, "You asked him to come in, didn't you?" Quote, she replied, "I bade him to, but he refused. He said, 'Have you heard anything?' Quote, she answered, "When he had turned away, I heard him say something that I could hardly understand. I heard him say, 'Praise be to God who disposes the hearts.'" Zayd went out to the messenger of God and said, "O messenger of God, I learned that you came to my house. Did you come in? O messenger of God, my father and mother are your ransom. Perhaps you liked Zainab. I can leave her." The messenger of God said, "Keep your wife." But this story is rejected by most Muslim scholars mainly because of its lack of having any chain of narration and its complete absence from any authentic hadith. Some scholars found it absurd that Muhammad would suddenly become aware of Zainab's beauty one day after having known her all her life, and if her beauty was the reason for Muhammad to marry her, he would have married her himself in first place rather than arranging her marriage to Zayd. Nevertheless, could not touch her. He would come to the Prophet and tell him, and the latter would say, "Keep your wife," and Zayd would say, "O messenger of God, I shall divorce her," and the Prophet would say, "Keep your wife." Zayd divorced her and abstained from her, and she became lawful. While talking to Aisha, the Prophet fainted. On regaining consciousness he smiled and said, "Who will go to Zainab to bring her the glad tidings that God from above gave her to me in marriage?" And Muhammad recited the Quranic verse now found in Q 33-37. Abolition of adoption. After these events, the traditional Arab form of adoption was no longer recognized in Islam. It was replaced by kafala. 3 verses of the Qur'an were written about this. Al-Tabari states that Q 33-40 was revealed because the Munafiqun made this a topic of their conversation and reviled the Prophet, saying, "Muhammad prohibits with the wives of one's own sons, but he married the wife of his son Zayd. Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but the messenger of Allah and the seal of the prophets, and Allah has full knowledge of all things." Surah Al-Ahzab, Quran 33-40. Zayd reverted to being known by his original name of Zayd ibn Harithah and was no longer considered Muhammad's legal son. After the revelation of Q 33-5, call them by the father's names. Surah Al-Ahzab, Quran 33-5. Ibn Sa'd indicates that Q 33-37 was a specific instruction to Muhammad and Zainab to marry, and that it explains why the marriage was necessary. Behold, thou didst say to one who had received the grace of Allah and thy favor, "Retain thou thy wife, and fear Allah." But thou didst hide in thy heart that which Allah was about to make manifest. Thou didst fear the people, but it is more fitting that thou shouldst fear Allah. Then when Zayd had dissolved with her, with the necessary, we joined her in marriage to thee, in order that there may be no difficulty to the believers in marriage with the wives of their adopted sons, when the latter have dissolved with the necessarily with them, and Allah's command must be fulfilled. Surah Al-Ahzab, Quran 33-37. Military expeditions. Zayd was one of the famous archers among the Prophet's companions. Quote, he fought at Badr, Uhud, Trench and Khaybar, and was present at the expedition to Hudaybiyah. When Muhammad raided Al-Muraisi, he left Zayd behind as governor in Medina. Zayd commanded 7 military expeditions. Al-Narada in November 624. He captured a caravan of merchandise, but most of the Meccan merchants escaped. Al-Jumam in September 627. Al-Is in October 627. At Taraf, a raid in the Nakhl region, on the road to Iraq. Wadi al-Qura. Zayd raided the area in November 627, but the Fazara tribe counterattacked, killing some of the Muslims. While Zayd was carried wounded from the field, Zayd swore revenge and, after he had recovered from his injuries in January 628, he returned to Wadi al-Qura with a larger army. This time he defeated the Fazari Hisma or Kushain against the Judam tribe in October 628. The Battle of Muta in September 629, where Zayd was killed. According to Aisha, the Messenger of Allah did not ever send Zayd ibn Harithah in an army without putting him in command of it, even if he stayed after he appointed him. Death. Zayd led his final expedition in September 629 CE. A Muslim force of 3,000 men set out to raid the Byzantine city of Bosra. However, a Byzantine force of 100,000 Greeks joined by 100,000 men from Lakham and Judam and Al-Qayn and Bara and Bali intercepted them at a village called Muta. Zayd held the standard at the Battle of Muta until he was struck down by a spear thrust and he bled to death. The other two leaders, Far ibn Abi Talibon Abdallah ibn Rawaha, were also killed, and the Muslim army was routed. On hearing of Zayd's death, Muhammad went to the family. The daughter of Zayd wept before the Messenger of Allah, and the Messenger of Allah wept until he sobbed. Sa'd ibn Ubad said, "Messenger of Allah, what is this?" He answered, "This is the yearning of the lover for the beloved."